Welcome to the Shenandoah Valley. We are here for the 160th anniversary of the Autumn Valley Campaign, and I'm standing out here on Third Winchester Battlefield. We've got a lovely breeze. We can't wait to show you parts of this battlefield that American Battlefield Trust members have helped to preserve, that Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation helps to administer at this time. The Third Battle of Winchester takes place on September 19th, 1864. It's the first large-scale battle that's going to be kicking off this campaign as Union General Philip Sheridan is beginning to plunge into the Shenandoah Valley, and Confederate General Jubal Early is attempting to oppose that great Union advance into this strategic region. Chief Historian for the American Battlefield Trust, Garry Adelman, is going to be joining us to bring you the details, and we're going to go on a little walk on some of the trails here at Third Winchester Battlefield.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm particularly glad because this is a battle and a battlefield that I got into early, and it was also one of my introductions to the then Civil War Preservation Trust and now the American Battlefield Trust. I'll get into that a little bit later, but it's great to be back. It's beautiful as always here in the valley, and let's just set up this battle a little bit. Now, when you start getting into the battle, into the campaign in the Shenandoah, in September and October of 1864, you start to hear these different names. And in this case, we're going to be talking about a battle with several Confederate divisions under Jubal Early. You've heard of these guys, Rhodes and Ramseur and Gordon, and then a guy named Wharton. So, you've got this. But gone are the days when Confederate divisions were 7,000 soldiers. Now they're less than half of that. So they're not going to have that punch anymore, and opposing them are elements of two large corps. The 19th Corps under William Bricktop Emery for his bright red hair, and of course Horatio Wright's 6th Corps after he took over from John Sedgwick during the Battle of Spotsylvania. Okay, so these are sort of the opposing partners, and right now you are looking, you're looking generally southeast. I'm always a little bit tough on direction out here, and you're looking toward some of the main battlefield here. As Andy Poulton behind the camera looks over, you're now looking toward the first woods, and were we to scan further, you can't really see it, you'd be looking to the second woods and the west woods, post-war contrivances to help us understand this battle. Let me break it down a little bit, okay? Because the Union is moving generally from the east, and they're going to start to come up this way, and Sheridan is frustrated. And he's in command of all the Union troops that are coming in. He might have 38,000 soldiers, something, including his huge cavalry force, and he's frustrated. They're coming east, but they're getting held up by Ramseur's men in a place called Berryville Canyon, and in that sense, the Union is not attacking in the early morning. In fact, their main attack won't even start until 11:40 a.m. That's the exact time that it's given for it, and in summary, the Union troops start to deploy in the first woods over there. You can't see them, but trust me, we're going to get a good look at it, and the Union soldiers are going to start moving this way. We're talking about 6th Corps, like Getty's division. We're talking about 19th Corps, Cuvier Grover's division, and they're moving like this, okay? The reason I'm telling you this now is because the Confederates have horse artillery up here, and despite what you see now with all this tree cover, they had a beautiful view of it, and they hit them like a hurricane in the flank. As the Union is moving this way, here comes the terrible fire from, I believe it's Breathitt's battery. We're talking about at least 8 guns or something like that. And they are just absolutely destroying the Union flank as they advance from the first woods to the second woods, in between which is the middle field. So the reason I wanted to stop here was to not only tell you that, but in the meantime, the battle continues. The Union attacks across the middle field, the Confederates counterattack back. We'll cover that later. But as part of this fight, while the 6th Corps and the 19th Corps are on the other side of the water course in the distance, it's called Redbud Run, okay? Here comes a new corps, 2 divisions under the command of George Crook. That's the 8th Corps, and one of those divisions is on the other side of Redbud Run, and another one is on this side. I believe that's under Duval, and they're going to come and traverse this very ground here. The Confederates, who had horse artillery up here, are gone, and Duval is going to use this same beautiful platform that you see that the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation has marked with cannons up here. They're going to use the same artillery platform, but this time to hammer the Confederates, okay? So in the faces of this battle, this can get a little confusing, but keep this in mind. Basically, a lot of the fighting is going to be done between the first woods and the second woods and the west woods, okay, with the middle field in between. But eventually, with the Union coming up here, Duval's men and their artillery up here, they're going to start to threaten the Confederate left flank over there and start to really hit them at a place called the Hackwood House that you'll probably get a glimpse of as well. So we're going to pick up and move from here. We're going to descend down to Redbud Run. We'll show you some of the B-roll of what happened down there. Maybe we'll even film right at the bridge. So now we've descended down toward the first woods, but we're still not there. We're along the banks of, as you see, Redbud Run, okay? And I'm gonna have to move forward in the story a little bit because after the 19th Corps and the 6th Corps moved forward, and even after the Confederates sort of pushed back on them, there's that other movement I told you about the 8th Corps. Duval's division on the other side of this run are going to advance along this way, and then they're going to cross this run, okay? And notably, future President Rutherford B. Hayes is here commanding a brigade. And right in the distance, right where you see it here, is where he leads his men down. It's particularly dangerous, it's deadly, and as soon as they got to the bottom, they knew this was going to be very difficult. There's Confederates on the other side shooting them down, probably Gordon's men, maybe Wharton's men, helping them a little bit. And here you've got Hayes's men get down into the muck. Some of them are right away unable to move, and they're frozen and getting shot at. And famously, Hayes is the one, I believe, who said, to stop was death. To continue on was probably the same, but on we went across the run. And they did their best to move their way across. A lot of people getting shot, maybe some of the wounded even drowning in the run at the time, maybe a little bit deeper and muckier than it looks like, especially at the time. But onward they move up and help to unhinge the Confederate position there. With them and other troops as well, they're going to get around that Confederate left flank, which is going to threaten them away from this part of the battlefield, which is going to bring on the final phase, and that is a powerful cavalry attack down the Valley Pike, or up the Valley Pike, okay? Now, we're going to move on to another stop, but before we do, let's welcome, and I'm going to say it in a DJ voice, Sarah K. Bierle with an interesting fact of the day.
Thanks, Gary. I just wanted to point out Redbud Run. What's it named after? Well, if you've had the opportunity to come to Virginia in the spring, or maybe if you're planning a trip to come to Virginia in that season, you might see redbud. So it is a flowering tree. It is bright pink, almost a bright purple, very bright, stands out. It blossoms early, just as the early green leaves are starting to come out. So there's no blooming redbud as we're filming this video, and there wouldn't have been any of those flowering trees at the time of the battle in September 1864. But in the spring, there must have been a lot of redbud in this area, and maybe Andy will even be able to put a photo on the screen so you can see what it might have looked like. One other thing I want to point out, tacking on to Gary's facts about Rutherford B. Hayes, and he'll be a future U.S. president, there's another future U.S. president that's fighting here at Third Winchester, and that is William McKinley. So we've got two future U.S. presidents fighting here on this battlefield.
Both from Ohio.
Both from Ohio. Are we ready to continue on to our next stop?
We're ready.
Let's do it.
All right, and here we are in the middle of everything, appropriately called the middle field at Third Winchester. The first woods are behind me, and as we walk around and start to look more sort of northward, we're looking back to where we actually started this video. Across through those trees is Redbud Run, above which is the bluff. That's the artillery position I talked about. Through these trees is the Hackwood House and barn that we've referenced, and we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. Over here would be the second woods, off in the distance, closer than the woods you see in the far distance, but there would have been a wood line. That's the Confederate position over here. Out here is the more of the middle field. It's a residential development now. This place was too late to be saved, but then that connects with the first woods over here, the Union position. In other words, the Union is attacking across this middle field toward the second woods. The Confederates counterattack across this field toward these woods. So let's set it up a little bit. The initial attack is going to be done by some elements of the 6th Corps out of view here, but as far as where we're standing now, we're talking about Cuvier Grover's division of the 19th Corps. Remember, Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment, Company. You can go down from there if you'd like, okay? You don't hear a lot about the 19th Corps. The 19th Corps had spent a lot of the war in Louisiana, around the Gulf of Mexico. They famously took part, as major part, in the Red River Campaign and the Battle of Mansfield, cool place. And Cuvier Grover himself had attacked the near the deep cut at 2nd Manassas. I mean, real deal fighting here. And Grover's task now is to lead his 4 brigades out. And these 4 brigades, I believe under Sharp and Burge and Molyneux and Shunk are going to come out here. We're talking about Pennsylvania, New York, Iowa, Massachusetts, and other troops coming across these fields here. They come across with a big shock, but they're getting that terrible fire, a more murderous fire I never witnessed, I believe Emery said. My God, this is a perfect hailstorm. They're going to be feeling the effect of that, but onward they go. Sharp's men push across this field right here toward the 2nd Woods, and the Confederates weren't ready. Early had not formed all of his men. General Gordon wasn't ready. He only had one of his brigades deployed. That's his old brigade, the Lawton Gordon Evans Brigade of Georgians, and those Georgians were there, but they were alone. And for the first time in their history, they actually broke through the 2nd Woods. Here comes Sharp's men actually following them. Burge comes up, and they're doing it. And here comes another line, that sort of Molyneux and Shunk coming up here as well. The Confederates are scrambling to try to put something together over there in the 2nd Woods. And luckily for them, they've got Carter Braxton there with a battery of cannons there, and they're hidden behind an innocent-looking haystack. Picture it off in the distance somewhere that way. I like to picture it right across from Hackwood. And as the Union men, flushed with victory, continued on, Sharp tried to slow them down. No, don't slow down. But they were flushed with victory. They move on, and then they moved into the range of the guns. And that proved a sort of a turning point of sorts, for now you've got Confederates under Zebulon York and Alfred Terry and Cullen A. Battle starting to insert themselves into and onto the flanks of the Union Army. The Union Army will begin to fall back. And here's Battle under General Robert Rhodes, who's even further over in a place called the Westwoods there. They're going to start to push back against the Union forces, actually coming all the way to the 1st Woods over here, okay? Luckily, you've got David Russell's 6th Corps Division. This is the day he'll breathe his last. This is the day Robert Rhodes will breathe his last in the Westwoods over there. Bloody for general officers, and all together. The terrible horror of this battle did not distinguish by rank. In any case, the Confederates then fall back here. There's going to be a little bit of a lull here, but then you've got a whole nother division of Union soldiers coming up. I believe that's under the command of Dwight. Dwight might be a brigade commander. That's okay. Sorry, Nick. And then you're going to have a whole nother corps arrive for the Union. This is the real story here. The Confederates can put up a good game, 14,000 against 14,000, 20, 25,000. But when the Union starts to bring another 10,000 and another 10,000 and threaten their rear with more than 10,000 Union cavalry over there, the game is going to be up. So here's what happens. I already described it. On the other side of Redbud Run and on this side, here comes Thoburn's division of the 8th Corps. Here comes Duval's division, and they move like this around the Hackwood House over there to outflank the Confederates, okay? The Southerners can do no more. They are going to hold out as best they can and then start to establish a new line over there near Fort Collier. Maybe you've seen our other video by now, okay? But then coming down, pounding down the Valley Pike, I guess it's up the Valley Pike, come more than 10,000 Union cavalry. It is, I believe, the largest single cavalry charge of the entire Civil War, and they come pounding down there. The Confederates, with a percentage of that many cavalry, can't get anything done at that point. They're going to go whirling through Winchester, the Union hot on their heels, and the Battle of Third Winchester will end. You've got maybe 52,000 soldiers engaged here. Of those 52,000, about 9,000 are going to be casualties, placing this battle about 18th in the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. This puts it ahead of a whole lot of battles that you know about, including places like Perryville and the Battle of Nashville and things like that. One man famously had his arm amputated at the wood farm over there, and he went back to see the farmer later. He said, "You buried my arm in a box on your land. Could I get it?" He's like, "I already reburied it in the National Cemetery in Winchester." So there's all sorts of stories like this. This field was a perfect charnel house right here, and that's not enough, because now with all the roads around here, the Union decides they can use this as a camp, a cavalry camp. So they're going to get elements of several different cavalry regiments, and they're going to encamp in and around these woods, and they called it Camp Averill after William Woods Averill, who's able to operate and send little troops and companies of cavalry out to try to accomplish the various goals of the Union Army here. And this is like in the winter of 1864 as the war approached its end. So it's a multi-use place. I'm going to talk about the preservation a little bit later. We're going to be joined by Sarah at our last stop here. We'll have a few more things to wrap up.
Behind me, you might be able to spot the historic Hackwood House. It was here at the time of the battle, And it is still on private land, so we're not going to be able to go down to it and see it closer in our video here today. But I wanted to point out the house because we do have some imagery of it. There's a wonderful sketch by James E. Taylor, who's a sketch artist accompanying the Union Army during the Valley Campaign. So you might be able to see that on the screen now once we hit the editing phase. And I think Gary had mentioned there's also a historic photograph of the house taken a little bit later. But I wanted to take a moment here because the house sits at this juncture point where we're at on the battlefield. We've got the Confederate line out in this area. We have Thoburn's division swinging up to do their flank attack. We'll have the Union cavalry making their charges in the land far off behind me, heading down or heading up the Valley Pike, heading south on the Valley Pike. Gary's cheering because I tripped up on directions in the valley. That's all right. Union cavalry is heading south on the pike where they will drive Confederates out of Fort Collier as the Confederate lines are collapsing on September 19th, 1864. So right here at the epicenter, and actually on some of the original burial rosters where we know where Union soldiers were buried, where they fell on the field, there are a lot of soldiers that are listed as being buried on Hackwood's farm. So we're really here at a center of a lot of fighting that happens during the Third Battle of Winchester. A couple things to point out with the Hackwood House. It is believed to have been built by Hessian soldiers in the probably post-Revolutionary War era, but these guys who've been captured. We know that the original owner, constructor of the house, was involved with the, I believe, American cause during the Revolutionary War. And so possibly some prisoners of war are hired or instructed to help with building this house. So we got a little bit of Revolutionary War history layering in, but then let's jump forward back to our Civil War era. Fighting up in this area is Colonel George S. Patton. He's commanding a brigade here at the Third Battle of Winchester. And if the name Patton is sounding familiar, that's because George S. Patton, fighting here at Third Winchester, he'll be mortally wounded in the battle and die 6 days later. But he already has children, he already has descendants, and his grandson will be George S. Patton, who is fighting with the American Army in World War II in Europe. So we have lots of layers of history coming together at this place, at Third Winchester Battlefield in the Shenandoah Valley, and to talk about the preservation of this land and how we're able to bring stories together. I'm going to bring back Chief Historian for the American Battlefield Trust, Garry Adelman.
Hey, she knows my title. Check it out. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. At the outset of this video, I talked about how it was particularly special for me to be here, and that's true. In late 2003, I was contracted as a contractor with History Associates, that's where I worked at the time, to help with the interpretation of this battlefield by the Civil War Preservation Trust. And so this was the first battlefield that I got to help actually lay out. It was me, it was Tim Smith, yes, he leaves Gettysburg once in a while, Amber Moulton and Chrissy Dunn Johnson, and we came here before there were any of these trails. Just there was a bridge over Redbud Run, but it was, completely remote, and we had to just figure out what to put where. That's where Shunk's Iowans fought. That's where Battle counterattacked. I think Rhodes was killed over there, and we'd had help from some of the predecessors and whatnot, and we sort of laid this battlefield out on the original 200 acres that were preserved by the Civil War Preservation Trust. Then they got 22 or so more, and then the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation has hundreds more, and we were involved with helping that as well. So it's so gratifying to not only see a battlefield that is preserved, but one that is well interpreted. And while we've been out here, we've seen cross-country runners, we've seen people reading the signs. Again, the ultimate result: preserve the land, make the land accessible, interpret the land. And I can't help but think that a lot of the scholarship on Third Winchester, since 2003, 2005, 2008, has to do with the fact that you can come out here and access it and see the ground, as you well know. So members and supporters of the American Battlefield Trust know why we do what we do, and here's one of the great examples. And I can't thank you enough for all your generosity, whether it be education or preservation. Thanks to Andy Poulton behind the camera. We are trudging here on a hot day. Thanks to Sarah K. Bierle. Thanks to SVBF for stewarding this battlefield. And thank you all for all your support of everything we do.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust's YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.